Adam Voigt is a repeat visitor to the Happy Families podcast. Why? Because he's one of the most sensible, one of the most interesting, and one of the most pragmatic voices when it comes to how we engage with schools as parents in Australia. If you are a parent or a teacher, this is one of those must-listen interviews. Stay with us. G'day and welcome to the Happy Families podcast, real parenting solutions every day. This is Australia's most downloaded parenting podcast. My name's Dr. Justin Coulson, and I'm absolutely rapt to have the CEO and founder of Real Schools, operating in more than 300 schools around the country now, Adam Voigt, with me to talk about the things that apply to us as parents, but also the stuff that affects teachers. We're going to be talking about phone bans in schools, overt sexual behaviour in schools, teacher burnout, and also a new book that he's got out that is available for every teacher in the country. I think you're going to want to listen to this conversation. There's so much good stuff to discuss. Adam, thanks for being with me.
My pleasure, Justin. With an intro like that, mate, I'm happy to talk for hours, but I'll try and keep it short.
You're a TV superstar. You've been on all of the big shows and people keep on ringing you because you've got so many sensible things to say. Let's start with what I think is probably a bit of a softball one, but it's worthy of conversation because not every school system is on board yet. But essentially, state-run schools, government-run schools around the country have unanimously over the last year or two gotten on board with banning telephones in school settings. So from 9 to 3, no telephones if you're at school in a public system. What have you seen in terms of the results around this?
Well, first of all, the results are undoubtedly a win. So that doesn't mean that it's a 100% win, and it doesn't mean that it's without problem being able to tackle something like this. But when you consider where we came from, that almost universally across the country, we thought it was impossible to ban mobile phones. I actually wrote an article that was published in The Age about 6 years ago where I said, I think that we just have to accept that every kid's going to walk around with technology in their pocket, and then had to write another one about 12 months ago where I confessed my wrongness, where I had to say that this is actually the evidence is it's just having too much negative impact on our young people. The evidence is that they need a break and that school is a great time to be able to get that break. So the challenge is, how do we do it? And I think if we looked at the spectrum of where it's worked and where it hasn't, we would see that there are schools that it's worked okay. There's a handful of schools where it hasn't worked. And there are schools where it's worked exceedingly well. And exceedingly well in terms of it being reported positively by all stakeholders, especially the kids.
Yeah.
And so, when I look at schools that have done this really well, I think about one of our partner schools in Western Sydney whose principal, really clever guy. And he, when the directive came through, because that's how it landed, we will ban mobile phones, his first step was to bring in his student leaders. And he asked them to all bring a friend who they considered to be one of the cool kids. And he told this group of kids in his office, none of the communication around this mobile phone ban, which we have to do, none of it is going to come from me or from our staff. It's all coming from you guys. So you tell me, how do we get this done with parents, with staff, and with kids in a way that has us all feel like we've got ownership of it? And he's one school, that's one school that I would say is like at the very pointy end of schools where this has worked well and where his students are saying, we love it.
That's such a great story. I love the student-led empowerment there. Adam, my read of whatever research has been released indicates that there's been a seeming reduction in bullying. There's more high-quality concentration happening and better learning happening in classrooms. Academic achievement appears to be on the up. All of these things are being pushed onto this school ban. What else have you seen in the data, and is there anything that's sort of really worth celebrating across the board, even though it's not a resounding success everywhere?
Yeah, I think the thing that's worth celebrating is the first steps. So I don't think we should think that this is going to dramatically improve NAPLAN or ATAR results or anything like that. But I think that what we can do is say that we can have real confidence, given the research by people like Jonathan Haidt and Sherry Turkle and Jean Twenge and people who have all been saying for years that this is actually changing young people in the wrong direction, that I think what we should be excited about is what happens to the students who are, say, in year 7 now, and when they get the next 6 years of practice being in the company of other people face to face rather than staring downwardly at a phone. when they have postures in their life that they practice that don't look miserable. If you think about the way we look, Justin, when we look at a phone, we actually strike a pose of kind of putting our chin down to our chest, which is the pose you make with your body when you're miserable, when you're sad. But when you think about what you look like when you're actually talking to another person, we take a more happy disposition when we're doing that. And so I think there's incredibly, while yes, I think we're seeing some green shoots now, which we should be happy about. I think what we should be happy about is the kind of young people that will develop in 6 years' time if they get all the practice they need about being in that awkward, argy-bargy, sometimes uncomfortable, often happy conversation space with other people, the kind of young people they'll turn into, which is that's what I'm more excited about.
Yeah, I love that. I want to pick up on another tech issue here. In fact, there's a couple of different places we could go, but I want to talk about sexualized behavior in schools. This is in the news every other day. It's kids from, let's say, grade 6 through usually to about grade 10. And it's unfortunately almost always boys. Collective Shout, an advocate organisation for women and girls, released a report recently called the Sexual Harassment of Teachers Report. Teachers across the country are saying that they're being subject to explicit and inappropriate comments and groans and moans from boys as young as grade 4 and grade 5. We're seeing stories constantly about grade 5, grade 6, grade 7 boys, grade 8 and grade 9 boys who are setting up chats, and they're sharing racist and misogynist and anti-Semitic memes and sharing child abuse material and hardcore pornography. I mean, the stuff it's toe curling. It's breathtaking that the world's gone this way and that our kids so young are being so affected by it. In terms of this sexualized behavior in school, what are you seeing, firstly, to the degree that you're comfortable sharing, but secondly, and perhaps the bigger part of this question, what are we supposed to do about it?
Yeah, that's and that second part of it is probably the big question, because I think, like you, Justin, I'm seeing big problems. Yeah, and I worry not only, like you said, boys are overrepresented in this data, and also boys who, the boys that are not, they're not just our kids who typically struggle at school. They're our kids in those, what we might call exclusive or elite schools, who have all the advantages but still falling for this kind of, I guess, moral decay in the way that they're being built. So I get concerned for them, because I think, what kind of young man do you turn into if you think early that at a formative stage that's okay, or that it's not only okay but it's advantageous, And then systemically, if we don't take some action on this, then I think that we put our workforce in schools at enormous risk. So we already have a national teacher shortage crisis in the vicinity of thousands of teachers that we're short to run the program. 75% of Australia's teachers are female. And if we create a situation where we're driving them out of the profession at a time that they have options, they can go and do something else, where they're not going to be attacked by this.
I got to jump in on this for just a sec, just on that workforce issue. Writing this book about boys at the moment, and the latest data that I've seen coming out of the universities is that now, for every 10 girls who graduate with a degree in education, there are only between 2 and 3 boys, men, graduating with degrees in education. So the numbers are getting worse, not better.
Yep, on both sides of the gender equation. Because the one thing about this, kind of, whether you call it toxic masculinity or anything else, is that what it does, it sexualizes the workforce. So it means that we see teaching as a female job. So our males don't want to get the barbs at the pub about, what are you, a kiddie fiddler, or what are you working with women all day and all of that kind of stuff. They don't want to get that. So they're discouraged. But on the reality side of it, we can get women entering the workforce as teachers who very, very quickly go, hey, this isn't a workplace I'm safe in. This isn't a workplace that's good for me. I'm out. And so as parents, I think we're going to go, okay, ask your question, Justin, what are we going to do about it? And which for me is about going all the way back to saying, how do we raise better kids? How do we raise kids with this capability to understand that their behaviour has impact positively and negatively on other people? Which means building for them a healthier relationship with the shame that comes when they do something wrong. So what we see in kids typically is kids who respond 4 ways negatively when they do the wrong thing. They often either attack other people. So not my fault, I'll blame someone else. They attack themselves. I think every teacher's heard a kid say, I'm stupid. It's a way of making it static and they can't improve. Yes, you can. We've got to hold that optimism for them sometimes. They withdraw. So we see this in all the stakeholders in schools. Every teacher's seen a kid who makes a mistake, throws their book on the ground and storms out of the classroom because they just can't handle the shame of falling short. But every teacher also has thought about chucking a sickie after a bad day. And a lot of parents have thought about not showing up for a parent-teacher interview.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in shame, we just go like a puff of smoke. We disappear. And there's this avoidant behaviour, which goes to this overly sexualised behaviour that we're seeing in young people a lot of the time as well. They just don't want to feel the shame, so they do something else that kind of distracts them or numbs them from that feeling. They're all counterproductive. So what we need at a very early age is for young people to see and recognise that feeling of falling short, either by their own doing or just for who they are, and to respond to it productively. So teaching young people to resolve the shame of falling short rather than to do something negative with it, it's the long answer. But for me, it's the only way we build kids who are capable of resisting the urges that they're currently falling for.
Adam, let's switch this to teachers for a moment. For the last several years, there's been a lot of noise made about teacher burnout, more teachers wanting to leave the profession than ever before. I'm not seeing this receding in the data. I'm actually seeing it accelerating, teachers being sexually harassed, teachers being exhausted, more demands being placed on teachers in terms of the system, the curriculum, the schools, and parents expecting more of them as well. Number one, what are you seeing? And again, the follow-up is how do we arrest this decline?
It's really interesting when you look at the teacher wellbeing data that's out there, that there's nothing all that new in it. We've known for probably 20 years or so the top three big impacts on teachers. Number one is student behaviour, so how they can handle young people who are changing and their strategies aren't working anymore. The second one is workload. We've made teaching so much about compliance and less about actually just creating an environment where young people grow. We've given teachers no time to just talk to and get to know their students. And then the third thing that stresses them is issues with parents. And it's driving them out of the profession. Teachers got a brief window at the start of COVID where, due to lockdowns, parents were going, oh my goodness, I didn't know teaching was this hard. I really appreciate my teachers. But when the kids went back to school, it got worse. So it's like we poked that bruise, and that worries me. What worries me just as much now is that I had a conversation with a politician recently who said, I just think that when it comes to solving the teacher shortage crisis, we're probably going to have to rely on AI. And for me, removing the social realm from what we view quality learning to be should be something that frightens everyone with a kid.
Yeah.
So we need to actually take on this monumental task. And we talked about mobile phone bans. We can do monumental tasks. We need to take on this monumental task of saying, how do we create an environment where we value education in our country for our kids, not just my kid? How do we take the competitive nature out of it? How do we get it focused on building good young people for the community? And thereby, how do we make it a job that is aspirational to young people in years 10, 11 and 12 who are making decisions about what they want to do at uni?
All right, so I'm serving you up an opportunity to plug what you do at Real Schools on a platter here. It's an unscripted, unplanned question, but as I'm listening to what you're saying, so much of this feels like it comes down to culture, and culture really does come from the top. It comes from the leadership. Your work is all about changing culture. It's all about leadership. Do you see the same levels of staff attrition, same levels of burnout, the same stresses in teachers who are working on culture through the work that you do or the work that others do in terms of building stronger cultures and making schools feel safer and better for people?
Almost a silly answer. No.
Yeah. I mean, duh. Yeah.
So schools that do the culture piece right get benefits for all three stakeholder groups. So we've got a school that we work with, Clarence High School, don't mind mentioning them, in Tasmania. And they've been working with us for about 18 months now. So they had an issue around, they wanted to work on student engagement. One of the outputs that they thought they could get around it was improve student conduct and behaviour in the school. And they thought that one of the measures of that could be their student suspension data. Now they've done nothing about changing the threshold for suspension in that school. So the kind of the watermark for what's a suspendable offence in the school has not changed. But 18 months down the track, 60% drop in suspensions.
You're right.
So this is a clear indication that they haven't made it harder to suspend. They have a 60% better behaved student cohort because they said it's time to work on the culture and to actually think about the way that we're interacting with young people and working with parents to try and get somewhere on it. Then I think about a school that we've got in New South Wales called Berrima Public School, so a primary school. And the work that's been done there on building a culture that benefits the teachers is outstanding in this school. So they now have a situation where the National School Improvement Partnerships and Curtin University researched and studied the school, and the data that came back to them about how 87%, 97%, 100% of the staff are making statements about the fact that they feel safe, nurtured, comfortable at the school, that they have no intention to leave the school. Now, comparative to the profession as a whole, anything that is above 90% typically for that is so far above the standard curve. It's ridiculous. They're not hunting around for teachers. They've got teachers ringing up and saying, "Can we come and work at this school?" Because we've heard the stories. This is a productive place to work. At the same time, their NAPLAN results are through the roof. Their parent satisfaction data is amazing, and their kids, when surveyed, are telling us that the number one thing that they value about their school is rule clarity. So this is a school that basically said, forget the lists of rules, forget the control stuff. This is a school that said, let's create an environment where kids' innate goodness can kind of come out of them, and it does. And so this system of control and prevention that we're constantly asking teachers to take on. When I saw another statement in the paper the other day from politicians saying it's time for us to crack down and reclaim the classroom, I was like, what's going on here? What are we, some tyrannical leader of authoritarian leader of a country trying to take territory off an enemy? No, we need to reclaim the way we work, not the ground. Work the right way, all stakeholders will benefit. We've got to support teachers to find that way of working.
So when you say this, here's what I'm hearing. You said that the three biggest challenges that have been consistently showing up for the 2 decades are student behaviour, workload, and parents. And by working on culture, students start to behave better, which is it's not going to get rid of all workload issues, but it's going to free up more capacity so that you can do the work that needs to be done. And parents aren't going to be on your back. Why? Because the kids are actually having a good time at school. They're glad to be there. So by working on culture, you get a positive outcome. And yet it's just so hard to shift culture for so many schools.
It is, because I guess they don't realise first. One, they don't know what culture is. So when they, I ask school lead, I ask a room full of 500 principals, who thinks the culture of their school is important. Everyone puts their hand up, and then I'll say, put your hand up if you'd like to come out on the stage with me and tell everyone what school culture is. And so a lot of hands go down. So we've got to get clear on what it is, and we just call it a collective noun for behaviours.
I just keep on coming back to this idea of culture. I mean, the whole conversation really is centred around creating culture, whether it's around technology, whether it's around sexualised behaviour, whether it's around teachers feeling good or feeling burned out, and even dealing with parents who can sometimes be pretty demanding and add a lot of pressure to the lives of teachers and principals. Let's wrap this up with your treatise on culture. The new book is called Restoring Teaching, How Working Restoratively Unleashes the Teacher Within. Adam, you've generously made an offer to every teacher in Australia. Walk us through the offer about the book and how it can help them.
So it's a second edition of something that I wrote a few years ago. We've definitely upgraded and updated it to reflect some of these modern challenges that teachers are facing at the moment. We've given it away to 10,000 teachers. And at the moment you can get a print copy at cost for us, but there's also an audio book, and there's nothing weirder, Justin. I don't know if you've done this, than sitting in a booth and reading your own book for 3 days. That's
nine times. I've done it 9 times. Yeah. Did you find all the typos that you were convinced weren't there?
Yeah, and there's an audio book and ebook available completely for free online for any teacher who wants to read it. We've got our mission as an organisation at Real Schools is to transform education in Australia, which means that we need to be there for any teacher, and this is our way of being there for them without them having to put their hands in the pocket. And I get emails all the time from teachers who say that, one I had recently with a teacher who told me that reading it kept her in the profession.
Wow.
And I'll take that. So the big aim of the book is to teach teachers this restorative way of working. And then the second big aim of the book is to restore the respect that we have for the teaching profession through giving teachers access to exemplary practice.
Okay. And if parents want to have a look at it because they're fascinated by the idea of restorative practice or what you're talking about, it's available on your website. So we'll link to that in the show notes, and hopefully some teachers can take advantage of what I think is an extraordinarily generous offer. I wish I could give my book away to every parent in the country. Unfortunately, my publisher would not.
One of the joys of going self-published on something like that, Justin, is that we get to make these kinds of decisions. So it's really important to us. And so for any parent out there who might be interested, they can feel very free to go and get themselves a free copy, and to even drop it in at their local school and ask if they'd like to have a look.
That's so
great way for a parent to be generous.
Adam, every time we talk, I walk away feeling reassured and hopeful about what education can be and how things can work out really well in schools. It's such a mixed bag. In some ways, it just feels like a lottery, a principal lottery, a teacher lottery on a day-to-day, month-to-month, and certainly a year-to-year basis for so many families. And I feel as if you bring a lot of sense and sensibility to what is often considered the impossible profession. Thanks so much for the chat.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Adam Voigt is the founder and CEO of Real Schools and the author of Restoring Teaching. Like I said, we will link to that in the show notes. I always find these conversations so valuable and so helpful. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Like I said, check the show notes for everything we've talked about in relation to Adam and his work. If you'd like more info about making your family happier, visit us at happyfamilies.com.au.